Jupiter in the first house, expansive encounter. Welcome to Jupiter in the first house in synastry. In this overlay, we explore what happens when one person's Jupiter falls into another person's first house, the house of the self, the body, the personal identity, and the immediate impression one makes upon the world. This is one of the most immediately generous overlays in synastry. It does not build slowly through shared history or deepen through sustained intimacy alone. It announces itself early, in the quality of ease that descends when these two people first meet, in the sense of expansion that the house person feels simply by being in the Jupiter person's company. Whatever this overlay produces it with warmth, and it produces it in the register of possibility. Before moving into the specific dynamics of this placement, something must be said about Jupiter itself, because Jupiter's nature determines how this overlay operates, and the difference between Jupiter and the other planets is not merely one of degree but of essential quality. In traditional astrology, Jupiter is the greater benefic. This is a precise technical designation, not a generic complement, and it carries real interpretive weight. Where Saturn contracts and restricts, Jupiter expands and opens. Where Mars cuts through, Jupiter smooths the way. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, wisdom, faith, fortune, and the capacity to perceive meaning in experience, and these qualities are genuinely amplifying, sometimes transformative. But Jupiter achieves what it achieves through increase, through the widening of possibility, through the removal of limitation. Even at its most constructive, it is not a planet of precision. And when it operates without restraint, the same expansion that produces generosity and confidence can tip into excess, inflation, and a quality of grandiosity that looks like abundance but functions as a kind of distortion. What this means in synastry is that Jupiter overlays require honest assessment alongside their genuine warmth. The energy Jupiter brings into another person's house is expansive by nature. It enlarges, it encourages, it reflects back a more spacious version of whatever it touches. In some houses and under some conditions, that enlargement is precisely what is needed. In others, the same force that produces confidence and optimism can, under sustained pressure or imbalance, produce overextension, unrealistic expectation, or a dynamic in which the house person's sense of self becomes inflated beyond what their actual circumstances can support. The specific house Jupiter falls into determines not just the area of life that gets expanded, but the degree to which Jupiter's benefic potential is either grounded and directed well, or given room to become genuinely destabilizing. It begins here with the first house, which is, as it happens, one of the more favorable places for Jupiter to land. The first house governs the self as it presents to the world, the body, the physical appearance, the temperament as it is immediately perceived, the quality of personal presence. It is the house of the ascendant, the point of rising, the interface between the interior person and the external world. In traditional astrology, Jupiter has a specific relationship with the first house that is worth examining directly. Jupiter rejoices in the first house. This is not a metaphor or an approximate compatibility. It is a formal Hellenistic doctrine, that of the houses of joy, in which each planet is assigned a house in which its nature finds a particularly congenial expression. Jupiter's joy in the first house reflects the resonance between Jupiter's significations, expansion, confidence, the projection of something larger and more generous than the merely personal, and the first house's function as the place where the self presents itself to the world. Jupiter in joy here is not a domicile placement. Jupiter does not rule the first house in any configuration, but the joy doctrine indicates something meaningful, that when Jupiter operates in the first house, it is operating in terrain that has a native sympathy with its expansive, outward-facing, self-presenting nature. The first house is where the self is made visible. Jupiter in joy here is comfortable in that visibility. It amplifies it, gives it colour and generosity, makes it larger and more magnetic than it might otherwise be. From the Jupiter person's perspective, the house person is immediately engaging, not in the sharp, activating way of a Mars overlay, but in a warmer and more welcoming register. The house person's presence feels meaningful to the Jupiter person. There is something about the house person's manner, their appearance, the way they hold and present themselves, that the Jupiter person finds genuinely worthy of investment. The Jupiter person may be inclined toward encouragement almost instinctively. They see in the house person's self-presentation not its limitations, but its possibilities, and they reflect those possibilities back with a kind of natural generosity that the house person may not be accustomed to receiving. From the house person's perspective, the Jupiter person's energy lands directly on the self, on the body, on the personal presentation, on the sense of identity as it meets the world. This can feel profoundly affirming. The Jupiter person may make the house person feel more capable, more confident, more legitimately themselves than they ordinarily manage to feel in the presence of others. There is often a quality of being seen generously, not flattered, not managed, but genuinely perceived as larger and more significant than everyday circumstances tend to confirm. The house person may find that they carry themselves differently when the Jupiter person is present, that they are more willing to take up space, more able to act on their own convictions, more alive to their own potential. There is a warmth in this that is difficult to replicate through any other overlay. At its most constructive, this overlay generates genuine expansion of the house person's self-concept and personal confidence. The relationship has buoyancy, a quality of optimism and forward momentum that sustains engagement and makes both people feel that their encounter is, in some meaningful sense, fortunate. The Jupiter person catalyzes the house person's sense of identity and personal possibility, helping them step more fully into a version of themselves that feels less contracted and more fully realized. The house person gives the Jupiter person a clear and worthy recipient for their natural generosity, someone whose presence makes the Jupiter person's expansive instincts feel purposeful rather than merely diffuse. Both people tend to feel, in each other's company, that they are operating at something closer to their actual potential. There is also a quality of natural goodwill that this overlay tends to generate. Jupiter in the first does not produce the urgency of Mars or the enchantment of Venus, but it does produce something genuinely sustaining, a basic sense of mutual benevolence, of wishing well for each other, of finding the other's presence more affirming than diminishing. This is not a small thing. Many relationships suffer not from dramatic conflict, but from the accumulation of subtle deflation, the sense that one is, in the presence of the other, somehow less. Jupiter in the first house tends to reverse this. In this overlay, the house person is more, not less, for having encountered the Jupiter person. And that experience of expansion colours the relationship with an enduring positive cast. And yet Jupiter is a benefic, not a guarantee. And the first house, despite its sympathy with Jupiter's joy, does not exempt this overlay from its characteristic shadow. What the first house does is make everything immediate and personal. Jupiter's energy lands on the house person's identity, their self-presentation, their immediate interface with the world. When that energy is well directed, it is expansive and affirming. When it is not, the same force that produced confidence and possibility begins to generate something less reliable. The shadow dimension of this overlay must be named directly. Jupiter in the first house can produce a relationship dynamic in which the house person's sense of self becomes inflated beyond what their circumstances and character can honestly support. The Jupiter person, operating from genuine goodwill, may consistently encourage and affirm in ways that outpace reality, reflecting back to the house person a version of themselves that is not quite accurate, not quite grounded, more aspirational than actual. The house person, receiving this consistent amplification, may begin to act from a confidence that is partly borrowed rather than earned. And when that confidence encounters the friction of the real world, the adjustment can be jarring. This is not malicious. Jupiter's excess is rarely malicious, but it is a genuine distortion, and it can leave the house person less equipped to navigate difficulty than they would have been without the overlay's inflation. There is also, at the interpersonal level, a risk of a particular kind of imbalance. The Jupiter person's natural tendency to encourage and expand can, if unchecked, become a form of idealization, one that asks the house person to remain consistently available as a recipient of Jupiter's generosity, and that becomes uncomfortable when the house person is simply, ordinarily themselves, rather than the enlarged version the Jupiter person instinctively wants to see. The house person, meanwhile, may become dependent on the Jupiter person's affirmation in ways that undermine their capacity to generate self-confidence from within. The relationship that began by making the house person feel more themselves can, over time, make it harder for the house person to feel adequate without the Jupiter person present to reflect that enlarged self back to them. At the more subtle end of this spectrum, this overlay is associated with a quality of unfulfilled promise. Jupiter expands expectation as readily as it expands experience, and the first house is a house of immediate impression rather than sustained depth. The initial encounter may feel fated, significant, larger than ordinary meetings tend to feel, and that quality of significance, if it is not matched by substance in the rest of the synastry, can leave both people feeling that something great was promised and only partially delivered. The distinction between the nourishing and the inflating expressions of this overlay often comes down to the question of groundedness. Jupiter's expansive nature is inherently optimistic. It perceives possibility and projects it forward. When that optimism is rooted in genuine regard and honest perception, it produces real growth. When it is untethered from the house person's actual character and circumstances, it produces a kind of pleasurable but unstable buoyancy, enjoyable in the short term, insufficient as a foundation. The Jupiter person in this overlay carries a particular responsibility to remain genuinely attentive to who the house person actually is, not merely who they have the potential to become, a distinction that Jupiter, by its very nature, is not always inclined to pause and consider. At its highest expression, Jupiter in the first house creates a relationship of genuine expansion and mutual affirmation, one in which both people feel more fully capable, more optimistic about their own possibilities, more willing to act on their own convictions for having encountered each other. The Jupiter person brings generosity, perspective, and a quality of faith in the house person's potential that can, when grounded in honest regard, become genuinely transformative. The house person gives the Jupiter person a sense of purposeful generosity, someone whose presence makes the Jupiter person's natural instinct to expand and affirm feel meaningful rather than merely habitual. When balanced, Jupiter in the first house creates personal expansion, natural goodwill, mutual affirmation, and a relationship that feels, in the best sense of the word, fortunate, one in which both people are enlarged by the encounter. When imbalanced, it can produce inflation, unrealistic expectation, borrowed confidence, and a quality of sustained promising that the relationship's actual substance cannot quite redeem. At its core, this overlay is about the experience of encountering someone who makes you feel more fully possible, more confident, more generous with yourself, more willing to inhabit the version of yourself you have always been working toward. The question it poses, and that only the two people involved can answer, is whether the expansion it generates is rooted in genuine seeing, or whether it is a quality of light that, examined too closely, turns out to belong more to Jupiter's optimism than to anything the house person has actually and fully become.
This was Jupiter in the first house in Synastry Overlays. Thank you for listening. Next, Jupiter in the second house.